They believed him to be a loudmouth teen before he assumed responsibility for the case and destroyed the prosecution. And the gavel smashes down, echoing a piercing crack. Via the air in the courtroom is heavy, in part because tension caused in part by the combination of pricey. All eyes are on the cologne and stale coffee. Not for the right, but for the defense table. Reasons that sit at the core of everything. The 26-year-old Tanisha Ellis has. Her jaw was clenched and her eyes were tired. Fingers clutching her armrest. So tight on the chair that her knuckles turn white. Here she is in this stuffy room of ruling against a charge that she never. She deserved shoplifting, which was absurd. Attorney and public defender who appears to. He would prefer to be somewhere else and modifies his tie in 2 minutes for the third time. He's losing and perspiring, and Jane Ellis is 19 years old, tall and slender, and shoulders and skin that appear to be deep brown. He sits in the chair, too heavy for his age. Arms crossed in a blank second row. Expression that conceals the impending storm. He wasn't supposed to talk inside. Arrived to help his sister so that the system delivers what it says it will. Fairness, but as soon as the prosecution. Jane smirks, understanding that this isn't about. This is a performance, justice, and Tanisha is the store security footage was used as a scapegoat. The evidence is at best tenuous and blurry. However, Michael Thoron, the prosecutor, acts as like he has an impenetrable. Tanisha is hardly seen by the jury in this case. Judge Reynolds was an elderly man with angular features and eyes that are fatigued. Barely masks his disinterest, then the public defender literally falters. Shuffles through his papers, fumbling them. As quickly as a man drowning in. Jane leans on his own incompetence. Hands reaching forward and clutching his knees. The prosecutor understands that this case shouldn't hold, but he is certain of the reason because everyone in this room thinks Tanisha will prevail. As she doesn't appear to be someone who is given the benefit of doubt. Afterward, it occurs when the prosecutor falsifies the information, manipulates the truth in a way akin to a magician. Executing a sleight of hand, he makes reference to a prior traffic infraction or misdemeanor. Not a ticket for theft or fraud, but he speaks as though it demonstrates a greater truth. The public defender remains silent. Jalen feels his chest constrict as he notices where they're heading, to the railroad. Before he even understands what his sister he's speaking and doing. The prosecutor stops in response to the objection. Judge Reynolds mid-sentence turns his head so slowly that it's nearly humorous. The whole courtroom alters with an emphasis on the young person wearing the hoodie who just spoke. "Excuse me, but the judge requests his." Jane's amused tone of speech doesn't. His heart is thumping back down, but his voice stable. That remark is discriminatory and unrelated to my sister's case. Driving history is unrelated to what's allegedly happening here. A beat of a pause followed by laughing, not only from the jury's prosecutor, from the onlookers. Even the judge. Judge Reynolds leans forward. Eyes that sparkle with condescension. "Son, this is a legal proceeding. Not a classroom where you can't play." The laughter ripples through the lawyer's ears. The prosecutor shakes his head in the room, already preparing to return to the jury, to keep the concert going, but Jane doesn't. Instead of sitting, he reaches inside his. The judge is going to reveal the pocket. When Jane pulls, security will take him out. leaving a little object that closes. Everyone is awake. A bar ID appears instantaneously, and the quiet is. The prosecutor's thunderous grin fades. The judge somewhat leans back. Jalen raises his voice even more subtly. As opposed to, "Prior to your honor, I am a licensed lawyer in this state." The courtroom as a whole stops breathing, although what follows just makes things worse for them. The courtroom's quiet extends excessively, much like the entire planet has ceased blinking. The judge, his lips parted twice, but there was no sound. The grin of the prosecutor has totally disappeared from the jury stairway. A few steel people are shifting in their seats. Looks at the bar ID that is laminated in Jalen's hand as though they require a moment to comprehend what they're witnessing in this child. Despite wearing sneakers and the courtroom was completely transformed by the hoodie on its the first individual to breach the. Surprisingly, the public is silent.
He clears his throat, defender, and slowly moves aside, his gaze flickering between J.N. and the judge appeared to be anticipating someone who can verify that this is not a prank. J.N. just stands there without moving, his shoulders squared, and he gripped as a weapon the ID because in this, Judge Reynolds eventually gets his room. His, "You are a lawyer," and his voice is calmer now, calculated, and not yet mocking. J.N. nods and replaces the ID in his "Yes" pocket. "You have my praise for graduating early. Last year." The judge exhaled after passing the bar. Through his nose, he looked fiercely at the court clerk, followed by the prosecutor, considering the public defender, who appears more rather than content to disappear into the background in your precise identity. "Doing here today, Mr. Ellis?" Jalen clenches his teeth, although his voice stays composed. "I came to help my sister, since I was in control." He looks at Tanisha, who is still seated at her hands clasped on the defensive table, collectively in shock, after which he returns to the judge. "However, considering the way this matter is being managed, I would like to formally assume control." A wave of whispers rushes in defense via the gallery. Even the jury, which has mostly remained silent, appears more vigilant thus far, although the prosecutor has stopped laughing. Michael Thornton, a man accustomed to total command over his courtroom folds, shakes his head and arms. "This is absurd," he murmurs, glancing at the "I am not sure what kind of honor you are judging. This is a stunt." But Jane interrupts him. "A stunt?" He emits a humorless, dry, "You mean that you're using a sister's driving history to influence a jury?" Following an allegation of stealing, the room changes. Judge Reynolds even leans forward, observing the prosecutor's expression a little, reddens, yet he utters a contemptuous scoff. "This child is hardly old. Come on, enough to purchase a drink. You anticipate that I will think that he has truly crossed the bar." Jan pulls out his phone a couple more times and shrugs. He taps, then raises it for everyone should view his name and qualifications. This is his bar registration is actually. Judge Reynolds really massages his temple, patience waning, but now rather than perceiving Jan as a joke, he perceives an issue.
A young black lawyer entering his courtroom without invitation. Unfazed, this is rather unconventional. The judge weighs his remarks slowly, yet the prosecutor huffs his jaw while working, as though he's finally grinding his teeth. Adds that if he wants to, he can grit his teeth to make him look foolish. Jalen finally takes a step forward, slipping into his sister's seat. Tanisha continues to gaze into his eyes. He was partly amazed and half incredulous. Leans in the direction of the voice. She nods. "Lo, you good?" Slowly, I'm not sure how you're managing this. However, he says, we have this offering her A tiny, comforting nod, and then he straightens and gives it his whole focus. To the case since it's currently war, and he asks as his first action. The one query that makes all the difference. Jane bends over with his elbows on his fingers intertwined on the defense table. His thoughts is inscrutable, but his expression. 10 steps have already been taken. Ahead, Mr. Thornton, he says with ease. Meeting the prosecutor Leighton's gaze. Begin with the fundamentals. Could you please remind the court at the precise moment when the accused, the act of shoplifting took, where the prosecutor becomes a little more rigid. Caught off guard by Jane's rapid. He takes charge, clears his throat, and examines his notes as if he hadn't previously. As per the store's security video at 3:42 p.m. He states. Nods correctly, and where was my client as security arrived? Thornton furrows his brow at her. The shop. Jane tilts his head slightly as he leaves. Pretending. Curiosity is not present outside the store. Beyond the gates that detect theft. Thornton stops due of Jane's expressions that it is risky. No, he grudgingly acknowledges that she hadn't yet left the building. Jalen doesn't even. To be clear, my customer never blinks. Truly left the store without paying. Thornton's merchandise shifts. She was moving in the direction of the. Jalen smiles knowingly as he leaves. Sufficient for the jury to notice approaching right but hadn't left, but security still held her. Now takes turns speaking to the jury. Seemed to have been apprehended. Someone who was still inside or stealing. The shop, perhaps en route to buy the goods in. Inquire about a tiny ripple of whispers. Stretches throughout the jury box. The prosecutor is aware that this is a poor appearance. Swiftly regains control of your honor. Motive is not necessary in order to steal. Leaving the building, however, it does need. Mr. Thornton. Jalen interrupts with intent. Well, and we currently only have an eye on. We have video of Thornton clenching his jaw. Jane nods in the video as if thinking. Then without skipping a beat, fantastic. Let's discuss that, and he turns to. Your Honor, the court clerk, I would like to. Having the video replayed for the Reynolds, the jury judge, pauses because he knows where this is headed, but he is also aware of. There is no legal justification for rejecting the. Finally, he gestures to the clerk to make the request. Continue. Grainy black and flickering images on the screen. The courtroom is filled with white footage. Everyone looks on as Julie leans forward. Tanisha looks through the bookshelves and selects a clutch, scarf, and earring set. Bag. She moves in the direction of the register where a line has created. Then something intriguing occurs. She pauses to check her phone, and then rotates a little as though searching for. Security enters before she even reaches the. Jane, the registrar, reclines in his chair, allowing the quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, he is finally stretching. Speaks to the jurors. Where in that? Do you see my customer in the footage? No one responds to theft as theirs. No response, the prosecutor modifies. A glimmer of annoyance in his tie. Movement security had cause to think. She was trying to get away with. Jalen raises his hand to pay, and you can see that's the item they thought they had, but belief isn't. The assumption of evidence isn't. Evidence that he allows his statements to settle before. With a conscious pause, he adds, unless there was obviously some Another factor that led them to conclude she was a. The suggestion of thief lingers. Judge Reynolds is tightened by Thornton's face. Jalen moves in his chair and leaves it there. Only long enough for him to. Stands I want to give the store a call at. Bringing the security manager to the stand, hence. When the case actually begins to decline. Apart from the store's security chief. In his late 50s, Richard Dorson takes the stand. Wide shoulders, the type of man who's spent too much time in the industry to second. Guess himself, but he's going to force Jalen to do just that. That Jalen nonchalantly walks up to and hands in his. Mr. Dorson's pockets, how long have you worked in the retail industry? Dorson, security, clears his throat. 23. Jalen nods, indicating that you've handled cases of shoplifting in the past. Dorson laughs. Hundreds, and there has been theft at your store. Preventative measures in place, such as. Naturally, Jane cocks his head to the side and. What policies do the policies pertain to? Do you need to halt a customer? Visual proof of theft prior to putting someone in custody, Dorson. Well, he confesses that he usually hesitates. A loss prevention officer or associate must witness someone stealing goods. And don't try to pay before. Jalen lifts an eyebrow in response, but in. The security took over my sister's case. Prior to her even arriving at the. Dawson's mouth presses into a register. Tough line because of the way she behaved.
No one at the front desk is aware that she owns the hotel, but what happens next reveals something more profound. The late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows of Tampa, Florida's opulent Westbrook Hotel, was more than simply an accident. The quiet murmur of talk and the gentle shuffling of voices filled the lobby's air. The five-star hotel in the center of the city, Footsteps, has its customary influx of tourists, business people, and occasionally famous persons who are well-groomed. The aroma of fresh flowers from the lobby filled the air, and the marble flooring shone in the golden sunshine. A young receptionist behind the front desk made everything appear flawless. Jenna anxiously adjusted her name tag. She had only been at the hotel for 3 weeks and still wasn't quite. She had been given the night shift and was at ease with the quick pace, but she could immediately feel the pressure building. She did her best to maintain a calm demeanor despite the hectic check-in process and the phone ringing every few minutes. There was a grin on her face, but today was different. It was almost too quiet, and Jenna couldn't get rid of the sensation that something was going to happen when the doorknob of the front door softly clicked. She looked up as she turned to face the entrance and saw a woman enter with the confident gait drawing. The tall woman was wearing fitted pants, a black blazer, and despite having a plain white blouse, she had an unmistakable sense of authority. The woman was striking, but what really stuck out was the way Jenna's eyes naturally widened. Trying to force her typical smile, Jenna murmured, "Good evening," exuding a calm, steady confidence with every step. "I helped you today," and the perceptive woman returned the welcome. "When I checked in, I think Maya Daniels handled my reservation," she spoke calmly. Jenna quickly opted for the gathered and authoritative type that didn't need to be louder. As she typed, she looked at the computer, clicking the keys to look for the reservation. Looking up at the woman once more, her eyes lingered for a while longer than normal, since there was something about her that felt. Perhaps it was her confident posture or the way she held herself as if she were accustomed to being in control. But Jenna dismissed the idea after all of the visitors. Many powerful professionals went through these doors since they had that similar aura. Jenna whispered more to herself than to the visitor, following Amaya Daniels' right. In a moment, she discovered the reservation. Jenna was reading the screen about a 2-night stay in a deluxe suite. She smiled as she was ready to check the guest in Maya, who didn't seem to flinch, but she asked if she could see her ID. was a minor change in her posture, but Jenna was unaware of it. Shift in mood. Maya pulled a card out of her purse and slid it across the counter, her fingers grazing. Jenna took the card without giving it any thought and examined it on the desk's smooth surface. "Thank you, miss." Daniels, Jenna stated in a friendly but a little preoccupied tone. "I'll need to confirm some details, just a little bit. Please include your complete address and the final 4 digits of your social security number." Maya raised an. Jenna nodded but clung to her, raising an eyebrow but remaining calm. "I'm sure you already have all that in the system. Protocol. And regardless of the visitor, I can understand why she wasn't going to let this pass. Miss Daniels," but she smiled tightly, still unaware that it was hotel policy. Maya hesitated for a time as the exchange's subtle tension increased, and there was a faint spark of recognition. But she dismissed it, saying, "I'd appreciate it if you just check the system." Jenna wasn't finished apologizing, but her voice was still composed, but now had a professional tone that she hadn't anticipated. She pointed to the notice and said, "I'll need to see some identification. It's just procedure." On the counter that explained the hotel security protocols to every visitor before adding that it's actually not that big of a deal, merely a brief formality. There was a period during which Maya's lips formed a narrow line and her attention shifted to the side, flickering for a moment when "I'm actually the hotel's owner," she continued slowly, her voice tinted with a calm but building irritation. She wasn't yelling, but the weight of her words plummeted into the air with an almost undetectable weight. Jenna was unable to be ignored and kept typing on her computer. "I apologize, but I'll still need," she replied. "Please confirm the details before I process your check-in." A little too quickly, Maya sensed the growing. There was tension in the air, but she kept her cool, "I promise. I own this hotel," she said again. "I'm Maya Daniels, the CEO." For an excessive amount of time, Jenna's fingers stumbled over the keyboard, and her eyes slowly raised. It went swiftly to Maya's face before returning to the screen, but as soon as it touched her, her eyes widened and her pulse skipped a beat. In passing, this was Maya Daniels, the CEO, whom she had heard of. Naturally, it was widely publicized in the news and in the company's press releases that the woman in front of her was among the most influential people in the hospitality sector, the same woman who had built her hotel empire throughout the nation. But at that very time, Jenna's face turned pale, and she hurried to fix the "I apologize for the error." Miss Daniels, Jenna's voice abruptly stumbled. Maya's eyes were high-pitched with humiliation as she struggled to speak, feeling a pit suddenly form in her stomach. Narrowed a bit, not out of rage, but rather with something far more familiar, the knowledge of what had just occurred. The receptionist made a straightforward, yet profoundly instructive error. Error 1 addressed workplace biases and presumptions about who should hold leadership positions based on how someone. Jenna swiftly adjusted, attempting to cover up her nervousness with a barrage of excuses. "It's just protocol, you know.